Welcome to Rock Bottom Wellness, your one-stop shop for the lowdown on root cause nutrition. If you think you've tried everything to get your health and life back on track, think again. With your host, board-certified nutritionist and thyroid expert, Tiffany Flayton.
Welcome to another episode of Rock Bottom Wellness. I'm your host, Tiffany Flayton. My very first book, Rock Bottom Thyroid Treatment, an 8-week diet for people with normal thyroid tests to thrive and not just survive, is available today. You can purchase it through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kindle, and the links will be in the show notes. Welcome to another episode of Rock Bottom Wellness. I'm your host, Tiffany Flayton. Today's guest is a speaker, author, educator, and producer of her own daughter. Deborah has helped bridge the gap in countless mom versus tween, teen, daughter emotional conflicts. Armed with a sense of humor, a bachelor's of science in education, and a master's in education, Deborah is a sought-after speaker whose book, How to Keep Your Daughter from Slamming the Door, will be available nationwide in 2020. Today we'll be discussing what it's like to raise our daughters under the stress and pressures of today and how nutrition plays a huge role in how kids can overcome their anxiety, improve focus, and navigate life circumstances. Hi, Deborah. I'm so glad that you are here. We're going to talk about something that is common to both of us, and that is discussing the health of our kids. So you have a book called How to Keep Your Daughter from Slamming the Door, and I know that's awesome. It's a beautiful cover.
Thank you.
Yeah, so a lot of us that are parents can relate, and if you are not a parent, you, I'm sure, have heard of some of the teenage angst that comes with just being a teenager and then how to parent it. But then you and I have that common background of having an experience with teaching in the high school level and all the things that come with that, which is we could have a whole episode of just talking about how to teach high school kids. But the focus of our talk today is on girls and the teenage brain. And I know a lot of these things will totally correlate to boys and girls, of course. But this really resonated me with your chapter in your book that discusses specifically the teenage brain, because when I was teaching, that's something that I noticed there was a huge impact on how these kids function in school with all the pressures that are on them, not to mention maybe their background, their lifestyle, the stressors that they might have at home. But then on top of it, how poor their nutrition was. So we're going to talk about that today. So welcome to the show. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
What can you tell us about this? Like, give me, how did you get into doing this?
Well, the thing is that when you're teaching, usually you don't see the parents until there's a problem.
Right.
And when my parents would come in to talk with me and the kids would be there for a conference, the parents would already be mad and the kids would already be mad, so they'd be banging heads. So before they could have a solution, I had to be able to tell them, I had to get them to talk to each other.
Yes.
Once they could talk to each other, then we could talk about how to fix whatever behavioral or academic problem it was. And as a young teacher, of course, I made plenty of mistakes, but I ended up developing an arsenal of skills, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And what I didn't understand was that in general, people don't have those skills because they're not trying it on different kids in different situations and following up with their results. And also when you're parenting, because we're both parents of girls, it's different when you are in the hot seat and your child is the person who's being snarky and you're reacting to it. And I'd like to say that I can take all my skills and say, yeah, no, I have no problems like that because I know what to do.
Right.
But no, you react when it comes at you out of the blue. It's what you do with it after that you can develop the skills for.
For sure. So how did the nutrition play a part? What did you see in your classroom setting with that? How did that become a part of what you look at?
Well, that's kind of a multi-thread fabric.
For sure.
I was teaching biology, so obviously there was a large health component to that. And then I, many years ago, started teaching environmental science, and I saw movies like Food Inc., which, by the way, I totally recommend people watch that because it is a real eye-opener.
It's very hard to watch, but it's
very
much
hard
an
to
eye-opener.
watch. And I recommend you share it with your kids, but not until you see it first.
Right.
You should watch it first so you can walk them through the parts that are a little harsh. And I don't recommend it for middle school or younger.
Yep.
That's too much.
I would agree.
Although I've been in parent-teacher conferences where the parents are going, we're not allowed to go to fast food anymore because of you.
There you go.
Yes.
That's a win.
So that was one aspect of it. And then I ended up getting Lyme disease, which actually interrupted my teaching career because I was confined to the couch. And I was ill for a pretty long time I was on antibiotics basically from June to September, which is a really long time. But back then they were still fiddling around with what to do with it. And I got better, went back to teaching, and then doing my own research, I found that there were ways to cure Lyme disease without using antibiotics. And when I got it again about 5 years later, I said I want to do it without antibiotics because I'm pretty sure that caused me a lot of my troubles. Mm-hmm. I ended up with the first bout with a cardiologist who was going to fit me with a pacemaker when the Lyme disease was gone. I was in my 40s. I was going, isn't that for like old people?
Right.
But when the Lyme disease went away and I stopped the antibiotics, that all cleared up. So here, fast forward 5 years, and I've got Lyme disease again, and I wanted to do it on my own. So I went to a naturopath. And she was saying, no, you need to be on antibiotics. And I said, I'm not doing that. So you can either help me with what I'm going to do, or I'm going to do it by myself. So she said, no, I'll do it with you. So I found this thing online called Cowper's Protocol, COWPER, like the gland, apostrophe S, protocol. And it laid out all these things that you should do in terms of getting rid of it on your own. So she modified it for me. The doctor modified it for me and then said, if you're going to do this, you have to have an end date. Like if you're not cured by this date, then you need to go on antibiotics. Mm-hmm. And you have to clean up your diet. It has to be pure. And I can count on my fingers what I was allowed to eat. I could have tap water. Absolutely, positively, no bottled water, nothing with plastic. I could have olive oil, green vegetables, garlic, carrots, and onions, brown rice, and fish and fowl, chicken and fish, but not
farm raised.
Not shellfish.
Not shellfish. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So I know not to have farm raised, but stay away from the filter feeders. That's,
Right.
And that was it. That was all I could eat. And that, I ended up relying on to keep my sanity, a technique I had used with my daughter for, using, like this, Venn diagrams, for when we went shopping for clothing. And I had this epiphany once when I was teaching this in one of my classes. I could be using this at home. So I would say to my daughter, these are the clothes that you love, and these are the clothes that I love. And that part right there, that's what we're going to buy.
Right.
With no arguing, because you know that whatever we bring home, you're going to love. Mm-hmm. And we had little rules. Like she had to try on everything that I asked her to, and I had to let her try on anything she wanted. Mm-hmm. But we only brought home the stuff we both loved. And it saved us so much heartache over the years. So I did that with my Venn diagram. I made a Venn diagram of all the foods I was allowed, and then all the foods that I love. And then the intersecting section was what I ate.
Okay.
So it saved me from feeling deprived because it was all foods I loved.
Yes.
Okay. Fast forward, Lyme disease is cured and I'm all set. And the doctor says, okay, so you can go back to living normally. I ate crap for like a month and I got so sick. Mm-hmm. And then I realized it was the food. So I went back to the naturopath and she said, do an elimination diet. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that, you cut out something for 3 weeks, 100%. You don't have it in your diet for 3 weeks. And then on the end of the third week, you have 3 portions of it over the course of one day, and then see if you have symptoms. That's how I found out I needed to be gluten-free, which was difficult because you don't react right away. For me, I react to the gluten like 2 or 3 days later.
Yes, some people do that.
You know, you get a stomach ache or you bloat up and you go, what did I just eat? But it wasn't what I just ate.
Right.
So anyway, that was a really long answer to your question of how I got into this. Because once I understood what it was doing to my body, then I had to tell everybody around me, which was, my students.
Right. Well, that's the thing. It's, the brain is not fully developed to, they've kind of put some age on it, but about 26 years old. And we have all these foods available to kids that are not good, and they're hooked on them, and they're full of preservatives, they're full of colors, they're full of, and not the good color from actual whole food. Yeah. And so we think that these developing brains and their behavior are completely unrelated. Whether it's stress or, anxiety or acting out or shutting down or, whatever it may be. And so it usually takes something like your situation, something like my situation with thyroid cancer, and then connecting the dots with what we eat and how we feel to come about to what we do now. So, we're both doing something different than teaching in the classroom now, all because of our health, basically. So what is your biggest takeaway from the nutrition aspect and how you helped kids educate themselves about how the food affected them? Because that's the biggest thing that I worked on with my own kids is trying, and it just was over time. It took a long time, but I had my kids in my home, to deal with that. So when you're talking to kids at school, outside of your own household and your own daughter, how did you deal with teaching them the connection between what they ate and how they feel? How did you go about doing that?
Well, in my lessons, basically what I would do is when the kids are in school, they'll listen better than they will to their own parents at home.
For sure.
So just like in my book where I give the moms all these techniques about how to approach the kids, that's what I would do at schools. Tell the kids, this is what you could say to your folks. And this is what you can do to help your health. And I could talk to them about, like the kids who were in sports, which I'd say easily 70% of my students were playing some sport sometime during the year. And the ones who weren't doing formalized sports were doing extreme sports. So the kids, because they're kids, they're active, right? And when you say, you could probably go faster, jump higher, run, whatever, if you stop doing such and such, then they'll go, ooh. And the other thing is, if I could just diverge into the teenage brain, the brain forms from the back to the front. And I'm old enough that when I was younger, they thought there was like a little brain that became a big brain, and that's how the brain developed.
Right.
But over the years, they've understood it goes from the back to the front. And when the first thing that develops is their risk-taking behavior and instant gratification behavior, and or centers. And the last thing to develop is the frontal lobe, which is your logic and reasoning,
right,
which obviously is a cosmic joke. But it turns out that if you tell kids that they react this way, then they will make different choices. Are they going to make the right choice all the time? No. But if they understand that they're being driven by something that's not supposed to be driving them, they can make better decisions. So by all means, I recommend having the conversations with them. The other thing was I came up with the years, again, I'm old enough that my school didn't have girls' sports when I was, I am that old. And
you don't look it.
Well, thank you. And look, see all that clean eating.
Exactly.
So they started having girls' sports when I was probably a sophomore or junior in high school. And back then, as we came up through my college years and then my early adult years, they started introducing things like carb loading. and saying, eat all these carbs and it'll give you all this energy tomorrow. But what we know is that carb loading makes you shoot up and then drop.
Right.
And that is completely the wrong way to go. So I can have conversations like that with my kids who wanted to be athletic and say to them, if you do carb loading, it's going to interfere with your performance tomorrow. What you need to do is eat this balanced diet. And this is what I'm teaching you in school. You're taking notes on it. Go home and talk to your folks. And that's what would happen to help them.
That's great that you had time in your curriculum to do that, because I know for me, where I taught, it wasn't in, the standards talking about nutrition. And then the nutrition that was taught in health class is very different than how I practice now and what I believe to be real nutrition, how we should be eating and teaching our kids how to eat. But that whole aspect of having, or the thought process behind carb loading, or just bulking up the energy in the form of carbohydrates, whether they're good for you, carbohydrates, or not so good for you. So I remember being in middle school track, and we would go get a bunch of candy for the bus to go to our track meet. And I did sprints, so I didn't think I probably didn't need to carb load with, candy. And I didn't even really like straight up hard candies, but that's what we were told would help us to run our 200-meter race. It's just this, it just starts, and it's just like a thing you do, and it becomes sort of a rule, and you don't know any different. So unless you have someone like you to tell us, that that's not really the way to go about doing it, and really listening to our bodies according to, a balanced eating plan, primarily using whole foods.
You didn't like hard candies. Your body was rejecting that.
Mm-hmm.
That when you're saying we should listen to our bodies, because your body does tell you whether or not you want something. It's like we are conditioned to hit the sweet coffee shops,
mm-hmm.
which shall remain unnamed.
Right.
But the thing is, when you're really hot, what do you want to drink?
Mm-hmm.
It's water.
Yep.
Your body goes, I need some cold water right now. And we get confused by the media messages about what our body wants. I remember some old soda commercial used to say, obey your thirst. Right? Yeah, well, that's not what you need. And when you drink like the sports drinks and stuff for energy,
mm-hmm.
that's not good for you, because then you're going to come down off of that. And when you drink the sports drinks for electrolytes, there's all these different kinds of dyes and stuff in them that are not good for your body. But you can make your own electrolyte sports drink.
Exactly.
You squirt some lime, and you add some sugar, and you throw in a little salt, and you shake it up in water, and you drink it.
Yep, there you go. Some water and some fruit, and like you said, some salt. And that's I try to tell people too, that you don't have to drink all these quote unquote sports drinks, because they're actually, it's just doing more damage. But they're so conditioned, and it's marketing, and it's they market to kids. I mean, I remember when my kids were little and playing the little club soccer team, they're 5 years old, and we had to bring snacks for them after a 45-minute game where they don't even break a sweat, and they're more worried about pulling grass and piling up on their ball and getting their head stuck on the net. But we need to bring them, juice boxes and, whatever, some kind of popsicle or freezy or some, sugary thing for mm-hmm. these little 5-year-olds that are clearly not needing to replace their electrolytes at that point. But it just becomes conditioning. And so it's sort of going against the grain, and it's pretty hard when your kids are, it can be hard when your kids are a little bit older, when you're starting that and you're catching them when they're in 10th grade biology or whatever. But like you said, if they've got a goal in mind, if they're an athlete, if they want to perform better, if they want to be able to focus and study better, then they're maybe more motivated to do that. And then it's getting the parents on board with that as well. That's one of the things I noticed with a lot of the students that I worked with. So many of them on medication for attention deficit, and there was definitely those kids that really struggled with focus, and then there was those kids that struggled with focus but also had all these other things happening in their life, in their world. It's no wonder they can't focus. Is it really some chemical imbalance in their brain chemistry, or is it just their life that's affecting them? But medications being thrown on them, without looking at nutrition, just kind of blows my mind. And the school was available for foods for like breakfast in the morning, and I use the word breakfast lightly, or
yeah, I know.
They would come in with the rolls of donuts that had I think of it as plastic chocolate wrapped around them, boxes of cereal, like the full-on boxes. They'd bring those and they would just eat it dry. They bring it to class, and that was their breakfast.
I
so much of the
taught in
time.
2 different school systems that ketchup was labeled a vegetable.
Yes, because it's from tomatoes and high fructose corn syrup. Apparently that's a good vegetable. Yeah. So that's the thing that I really noticed with dealing with kids. And so I tried to sprinkle it in when we would talk about, the energy cycles and that type of thing. But I didn't have that time to really dig into the nutrition. That was left to the health teachers. And then they had their set curriculum, So I am really glad that you're able to speak a little differently about that with your students and wherever you taught. So that's really a benefit.
Also,
to them.
I taught while the standards were being developed.
Okay.
So yeah, it was much easier to teach the kids what they needed to know, and to put that component into your science lessons of how it applies to their lives, which that's not one of the standards.
No.
Yeah.
So you got to wait with a little freedom.
Exactly. If you're going to make it realistic for the kids, it has to be something that they can use for themselves. That's just the bottom line about it. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of teachers in my generation get out of teaching, because we're not teaching the kids, we're teaching the standards. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I'm going to get off that bandwagon. I will go back to what you were talking about with food additives and the junk food that they used to serve in schools. A lot of them have gotten a lot better. They serve fruit and vegetables and stuff. But I remember it being something that was supposed to be deep fried, which wasn't deep fried, covered in some kind of a batter. You didn't really know what was inside of it, and it had a sauce to put on it so it masked it a little bit. And then soggy French fries, and nothing green.
Right.
Now they're trying to make it more like that. So, and if you don't make those other options available to the kids, they won't go for it.
True.
Right? They won't reach for it. Plus, I don't know how it is in other states, but in Connecticut, at least when I was in Hartford for sure, the vendors who sell the junk food outside the school, they were given a boundary that they couldn't cross. Okay. That there was a certain, I don't know how many feet or yards or whatever, that they couldn't be on to the school grounds if they're going to sell junk food. And then over the years, I saw the junk food machines taken out. Yes. There used to be junk food vending machines as a source of income all over the place, but all those are gone. And some of them offer water bottles and things like that. But so I've seen some big changes, but still, we are a media-driven culture, and the commercials make people think, "Ooh, this will make it better." Yes. I remember being a young mother trying to figure out what to do for my daughter and thinking, "Oh, that commercial makes it look like it's important." This was obviously before I was teaching environmental science.
Right, right. So that's the thing. We think that certain foods give us energy. We don't think about if you just eat balanced and balance your blood sugar, you can have energy just from that. And then the other component I saw teaching high school kids was not only what they were eating, but also their sleep patterns. I mean, we know that teenagers can have weird sleep patterns in general, but with gaming and social media and stuff, I mean, there were kids I know that probably did not go to sleep all night long. And then again, they come to school and then they're expected to perform.
You can see it right here on them.
Yes, it's terrible, right under their eyes. They're sleeping in class. They're trying to get energy by drinking some Red Bulls or energy drinks or sugary foods or whatever it is, just, nothing that's beneficial to them. And it's just this vicious cycle. I say that all the time on this podcast, vicious cycle. There's so many vicious cycles. But when we have these that are affecting our kids at this age, and then all the pressures that are on them to perform at a whole different level than what we had to perform in school, like getting into college is a huge deal where, it was a big deal to go to college, for anybody when I went to college, but it wasn't like, this super feat to get into all the schools now. And now it's just high stakes for everything.
There's a whole industry around getting people into college now.
Exactly. And it's, if you're going to a really good state university, it shouldn't be like you're getting into Oxford University. But it's not like that exactly, but it's high stakes. It's very high stakes, and there's so much pressure, so much demands, kind of going back to, the standards and that kind of thing. Again, you don't want to go down that road. That could be a whole other episode, but, but we want to help them deal with these pressures and stresses that are put on them. Food is the way to do it. And that's what you have seen as well.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the ways to do it. There's a section in my book about the pressures that moms are feeling, the internal ones and the external ones. And then there's another section there about the pressures that the daughters are feeling, both internal and external.
Yeah.
Because you get two people who love each other, who are under huge amounts of pressure, and you put in one little misunderstanding and you've got this huge explosion going on between both of them. My husband used to say to me occasionally, only one of you gets to be the 11-year-old, and right now it's her turn.
Darn it.
So in my book, I have this list of symptoms that are showing if your daughter is too stressed.
Yes. Then let's go over those.
The way it internalizes it in their body. And perfect. The reason why I put that in there is because I know people who used to have stomach aches at school, and I didn't think anything of it. I thought, something they ate or whatever, And then a year later, they would stop going to school because anxiety was so high, or they would spend the entire week sitting in the guidance counselors, and we would send schoolwork down there for them to work in because they were too anxious to be in the classroom.
Right.
And so that's why I went through this in my book, because it's such an important thing for people to say, no, that's not a random thing. It's a symptom.
Right. And they're not just being dramatic and making things up and that kind of thing. Right. I think it's easy as parents. Sometimes we don't know what to do, and we just sort of think it's an excuse on their end. But when you see it in the classroom over and over and over again, it's not really the case. So
and that brings it back to the first thing that we were talking about earlier, which is that being in the classroom, you see lots and lots and lots of situations. But being in your home, you're only seeing one or two. They're your kids. Right. So those are only two examples. So it's easier when you see it in a large group that something needs to be fixed.
Right, for sure.
So this is literally a page I took out of my book. And I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but these are signs that your children are having issues with pressure. And overt ones are door slamming, yelling, anger, sulking, stomping away. All those things are wonderful because they let you know your child's not coping.
Right.
But when they hide the fact that they're not coping, their body says, well, we need to announce this some way. So this is what we're going to do. And then you see these things that I'm telling you are symptoms of them not coping with the pressures in their lives. So these are alphabetical, but so it's acid reflux. So they're having indigestion problems and things like that. Anxiety, cramps, which unfortunately can be masked by your friend coming once a month.
Yep.
Or the curse, as we used to call it. Depression, dizziness, frequent colds, headaches. They won't probably tell you if they're having heart palpitations, if they're in their chest, and I'm there's a little fluttering there that makes them say, what is that? So you may not even know that.
Mm-hmm.
But if they have irritable bowel syndrome, insomnia, irritability, feelings of isolation, like I don't have any friends, lack of focus, which of course is the big one for ADHD, nausea, nightmares, panic attacks. Well, I'm going to stop there.
That's a lot.
So, yeah, that's a lot. So the reason why I picked those out of this list
Mm-hmm.
is because those are also symptoms of food additives.
Right.
If you eat fast food or junk food and they have sulfites in them or preservatives or food dyes or food colors, those things create all of those symptoms I just said. Lack of focus, insomnia, irritable bowel syndrome, frequent colds,
Mm-hmm.
right? Those are symptoms of the diet, the nutrition your child is having. And if you're going to change things in your house and say, well, I need to get rid of that, I have a couple of ways you can approach this, because you probably will realize that if you take stuff away cold turkey and say, we're going to be better now, then you'll get a lot of blowback.
Yes.
So my suggestion is that the parents look at that list in the book and say, well, which one of those symptoms do I have?
Mm-hmm.
And then go check the foods that are in your cupboard for chemicals. And then you go look up the chemical and you see which of those chemicals give you those as a side effect. Then with that information, you go to your kids and you say, I'm having an issue with this symptom, like IBS or dizziness or whatever. And I just read that this ingredient causes this symptom. And it's in my favorite snack food.
Right.
So I'm going to try to cure this without medication on my own, and I need your support. So I'm going to ask you not to bring that favorite snack food into the house,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want to be tempted. It's going to take me about 3 weeks to adjust, and then, we'll binge on it that day and see if I get affected.
Right.
So it's not family, we're going to do this. This is, I need your help and your support for 3 weeks not to bring that into the house.
Mm-hmm.
And 9 times out of 10, your family's going to support you. If you say, I'm going to lose weight, it's not, for some reason, that tends to generate kind of sabotaging behaviors in the people around you.
Yeah, it does.
But if you say, I have a symptom I'm trying to deal with, and then you try to, you point to a specific food that's causing it, then you can even enlist your help from your kids by saying, if you see any other foods that have this ingredient in it, could you let me know?
Yeah, I think they would like to pinpoint things, to kind of help mom or dad out and say,
right,
you can't do this. They probably like to be in that position once in a while. But and then
the other thing you can do is
Mm-hmm.
you can say to them, well, if I'm going to take away chips, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
why don't you go find a good alternative for it that won't have this ingredient in it?
Right.
So you send them off to go find a good snack food that they would like.
Yeah, definitely more empowering to do it that way. And
Mm-hmm.
the other thing that I would point out and kind of stress to people is that you might know someone who, when they eat food colors, for example, like yellow dye number 5 or red 40 or whatever, I think it's red 40, where they can have that snack, say they have fruit snacks or something like that, and 5 minutes later they have outbursts or tantrums, or I've seen very, very extreme symptoms from those things, but other people can have it a lot more underlying. Like it's sort of like, I don't know if that's really my symptom or if what is causing it. So everybody can manifest those symptoms very, very differently. And just because you don't notice, you don't all of a sudden drop down on the floor and have a tantrum after eating a certain food, doesn't mean it doesn't affect you. And you have
That's
to
like me with
be a detective.
Mm-hmm. It takes me 2 or 3 days to see that I'm affected by the gluten.
Yeah, and that's a lot of times there's kind of a latent reaction. It takes some time, and I don't know if it has to do with just genetics or if it has to do with gut health at the time that the person
or
was dealing with
GMOs.
symptoms. Exactly, the GMO. I mean, there's so many things, and usually it's not going to be one isolated thing. It's going to be a cluster of things, and it does take a little detective work. So that's not to say to people like it's all doom and gloom and this is so hard, but you have to start somewhere and keep working towards it. And it might be a few steps forward and a few steps back, but you have to keep, pushing the needle forward to figure these out.
And I'll go back to my Venn diagram example. The point is, yeah, you're going to knock out these things that aren't good for you, but you're going to add things that you love.
Right. Exactly.
So what you'll end up with is only stuff that you love, not, you see in the sitcoms and stuff where so-and-so's making me eat bran muffins. They taste like cardboard. I mean, then you shouldn't be eating those.
Right.
They should not be included. It should only be stuff that you love.
Yeah, it should not be punishing to yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then the foods, of course, from as much as possible, be as nutrient dense as can be so that we, actually help and support the systems. Because what I talk about a lot of the times is the certain nutrients that are needed and need to be absorbed and digested in the gut properly if you have good gut health, so that you can create the brain chemicals that help us, be more level and help us be more focused and not get into that depression or anxiety and some of the other symptoms that you had mentioned. And so it's very important to, transition into the highest quality foods that we can handle as much of the time as we can, as much as possible. So. Yes.
Then the other thing is, since I mentioned GMOs, I'd like to talk about that for a second. The GMOs are genetically modified organisms, and I will never say GMOs are bad for your body, but what I will say absolutely positively without a shadow of a doubt, GMOs' effects on the body have not been tested.
Right.
They have not tested the effect of eating it long term. They have not tested the effect of eating GMO corn with GMO tomatoes. They have not tested the effect of starting it and then stopping it. They have not tested the effect of GMOs on the commonly dispensed medications. They don't know. And so what I'm saying is, if the GMOs are bad, I'm going to stay away from them now and wait until they test it and find out. And if they're good, well, so I missed a few years of eating GMOs, but when they find out that they're good, then it's fine. But I do know that our big crops in the States are soy and wheat, the corn, and beets. And the reason why I'm mentioning beets is because that's where we get our sugar from.
Right.
So if you want to eat sugar that's safe, if you can handle it, honey and maple syrup, or you can do cane sugar, because cane sugar has not been GMO'd yet.
Yep.
So what I would say is, get your sweets from fruits, and don't do juices, because juices go into your body too fast versus slowing it down when you chew it and you add saliva to it while you're chewing, and then it breaks it down in the way it's supposed to be broken down. When you have it in juice, it goes right into your body and doesn't break down properly. And that would be a tendency to end up being deposited as fat in your body.
Yeah, so, it's like eating juice or drinking juice is like unwrapping a piece of candy almost. It's kind of the same thing.
Exactly like it, yes. Except faster, because you don't swallow the candy as fast as you do the juice.
Yep.
Then the other thing is that I went to Germany last year. We had to go there for an emergency surgery for my husband, which everything is good, so that's all cool. But when I was in Germany, I knew I was going to be able to eat bread, because Europe has banned GMOs. So I knew it was going to be regular wheat. And I did. I ate desserts. I ate pies and cakes and cookies and crackers and bread 3 times a day. And it was glorious.
Yes.
When I came back, I knew I wasn't going to do that anymore. So I came back and I had stopped immediately because it makes me sick right away.
Yeah. So sometimes I think it's more than just the gluten that people are having a sensitivity to. I think it's the other stuff that really causes the problems for people with the gluten intolerance or what they think is gluten intolerance. I think it's much bigger than that.
I think that with the GMO wheats, that they have to add extra gluten to the recipe in order to make it do what it's supposed to be doing.
Exactly.
So
yeah, I know I've heard about that too with someone who.
I'm not sure about that last thing I just said. That's what I think. I've read someplace, but I don't remember where. So
yeah, and same with me. I have a story of someone who is from Turkey and they cannot eat wheat or gluten-containing grains here in the United States. But when they go back home, they can eat all the wheat products they want, and it's just not an issue. So, to your point, I think we could probably find lots of research on that because of how the European government with the foods treats chemicals and additives a lot differently than what we do here. Sadly.
And the other thing is with makeup, a lot of the cosmetic companies have chemicals in their cosmetics that are banned in Europe. Mm-hmm. So they have to make two lines. So they make a line that they can send to Europe and then a line that they sell to us, which I don't know why. Why wouldn't they just give us the good stuff? But they don't.
Maybe it's cheaper to make with some of those ingredients or something. I don't know. It must be.
Or maybe some of them are subsidized by the government because that's what happens with corn and wheat and soy. They're all, and canola. That was the other one I couldn't remember.
Canola, yep, for sure.
They're all subsidized.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm going to tell you the story real quickly. I was at a friend's house and it was a holiday gathering. And there were like grandparents and grandchildren and the grandmother was over by the fireplace, and the little 5-year-old grandson came over and said, "Can I have a piece of candy?" It was a dish on the mantle. She goes, "You have to ask your father." And so he goes and asks his father, and the father says, "No, not until dinner, and not till after dinner." So he goes, "Okay." And I thought, wow, what a well-behaved kid. Mm-hmm. So he goes and he walks by his grandmother, says, he said no. And he walks by her, and she slips a piece of candy in his hand, and he keeps going. And obviously they've done this many times.
It's their thing.
Yes. So I'm thinking, oh, well, okay. So I'm sitting on the couch talking to one of the relatives. And all of a sudden, this little boy leaps in front of us and says, "What's this?" And he runs across the living room and runs back again. And he comes back in front of us and says, "What's this?" And he drags an ottoman into the middle of the room. He goes to one end of the room and he runs and he jumps on the ottoman, jumps off and goes to the other side. And he goes, "What's this?" He proceeded to build an obstacle course across the living room, one piece of furniture at a time. And me and this person on the couch are going like this. And it was a one piece of candy.
Yes.
And the industry says, no, the sugar doesn't affect the kids. There's no data showing that. Yeah.
And what other chemicals did the sugar or did the candy have in it? What colors, what additives, what, whatever it is. So yeah, it's interesting, but I think it's so, I don't know, it's so insidious that's everywhere that we don't really know what's causing what. And that's why it's hard to identify. And I think that's why a lot of times parents will throw up their hands and say, okay, we need to do something. They need to focus in school. They need to get their grades better, whatever it is. How do we do that? Let's start with medication. That's, I think, kind of the process because they don't know where to even start.
Yes, it's food and sleep. Those are the two big things. So if your kid is not performing the way you want them to in school and in behavior, then look at their food and their sleep before you medicate because a lot of this stuff can be cured just with that. Mm-hmm. And if you medicate for behavior, you could be masking something else that's going on with the child, like stress.
Right. Yeah, and you're not dealing with those underlying conditions.
The causes. Mm-hmm. You're not dealing with the cause. So if you got a kid who's being hyper and you medicate them so they're not hyper anymore, you haven't looked at why are they being hyper?
Right.
What is causing the hyperactivity? Because whatever that is still is warring with their young bodies. And that still needs to be removed so that they'll be happy and healthy.
Right. Exactly. It just keeps on, just keeps happening and manifesting in different symptoms as they get older. And sometimes it's really hard in high school once they're getting to those ages to start then, depending on how bad the symptoms are. I'm thinking as, different kids and situations as we're doing this, having this discussion, and some things are it's pretty serious. It's pretty serious. You see some things when you teach in a high school, that's for sure. So let's go back to your book for a minute. So How to Keep Your Daughter from Slamming the Door. So I love that. It kind of gives a really good, yep, there's the cover again. It's just a really good, it just gives that feeling of, everybody's been there where someone is so mad at them for you being a parent and doing your parenting thing, so how do we deal with it? And again, looking at your table of contents either, looking at your table of contents really shows me things like it just resonates with me just from having that teaching background, but I don't think you have to have a teaching background to have it click and to, help your child go through some of these things. So when or where do people get your book? Tell me, or if there's anything else you want to touch on about your book that we have not talked about, kind of expand on that if you want to, and then tell us where we can get the book.
Okay. I'd say the biggest strength for this book is that the conversation suggestions that are littered throughout the whole thing, because a lot of times when parents want to change the situation, they don't know what's the first thing to say. So I give them different strategies that they can use to get in the door, whether it's the side door or the front door.
Right.
And things that I did with my daughter, and things that I help people do with their own kids as a teacher. There is a lot of ways to do things. And I would just want to say this to parents, that when you try a strategy with your kids and get rebuffed, don't feel too badly about that, because they have to be brought on board and they have to learn this new style. So basically what you do is you sit them down when things are calm, and you say, I'm going to try this thing. And then when you're down in the trenches and during World War III, you could say, I'm pulling out that thing I said I was going to try, and I'm doing it right now. And one of my favorite ones, which is a great interrupter, is the fake smile. It turns out that when you smile, it stimulates all these nerves that stimulate the brain and the rest of your body and create your happy hormones. Mm-hmm. Well, if you fake smile, your body can't tell the difference.
Okay. Interesting.
So if you go like this and, grin, stretch your, put your teeth together and just hold it for 30 seconds or whatever. First of all, it'll totally interrupt the fight that you're having. And second of all, it will reset your hormonal composition inside your body.
Sure.
And you can get your kid to do that too in the process if you tell them ahead of time. Because if you don't tell them and you start grinning at them like an idiot in the middle of a fight, they're going to go, there's something wrong with mommy.
That could make things maybe a little worse, depending on. Yeah.
But that's what I used to do, is I used to bring up difficult conversations with my daughter when there was nothing going on having to do with that conversation.
Sure.
So like we would talk about sex as soon as she came to me with a question about it, and I would tell her that we would prefer that you wait until you're old enough to handle it and you can make a mature decision, and I hope you make it out of school a virgin. And we had those conversations at a very young age, and she'd be like a sixth grader, because in the fifth grade they have the talk at school, right? So that's when I started having my talks with her.
Yeah.
And I'd say, I hope you make it out of school as a virgin. She'd go, oh, I will, Mom. Don't you worry. But when she was in the 8th grade, she was in a very small school. And so she had been tapped to play varsity basketball.
Wow.
Because she was a very good ball player. Mm-hmm. The older boys started to notice her.
Okay.
And she was getting attention in all different directions. And it was uncomfortable for her because she wasn't used to that blatant kind of stuff. Plus, she was 13 and they were 16.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and we had a talk one day, same talk, And I finished it saying, yeah, I hope you make it out of school a virgin. She goes, I do too. That was my flag that she wasn't coping well.
Right.
Right. And so you start the conversations at a time where it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can see, you have a, baseline data.
Right.
So you can see changes as it comes along.
Yeah, there's a little shift in her, what she's feeling. And so you can try headed off the path if you're having these open conversations.
That's right. And then to address what was going on with her, sometimes I'd say, what's going on with you? But usually you say, what's going on with you? What's the response you get? Oh,
no, I'm
nothing.
I'm fine.
Yeah. So what I would do is say, how is your best friend handling that? And then she would take the focus off of herself and put it on this other person. And they can't help but talk about the things that are next to their heart and their angst. Mm-hmm. And so they'll talk about them with somebody else. So that way you can bring up topics, I call going through the side door instead of the front door, and they will talk about the things, and the things they raise are the things they are dealing with.
Right.
When you say to them, so what are you dealing with? They're like, I don't know. That feeling of overwhelm empties their mind and doesn't give them anything to say to you. But when you say, what are they dealing with? They go, oh, well, I know what they're dealing with. Mm-hmm. And then they'll get all judgy about whether they should or shouldn't. And,
yeah, it takes the focus off them and their situation, but then it gives you an opportunity to help guide them through the process. And that's what I love about what I've seen with your book here is the strategies and just kind of simple, step-by-step process of where you can help your kids and deal with all the pressures and stresses that come up in life. And so I love it. I think it's going to be great. So where can people get this?
It's available online now. The ebook is out. The print book is going to be out later this year.
Okay.
You can get it access to the links of where you can pick it up at my website, deborahanndavis.com.
Perfect.
And we are doing the virtual book launch because the way things are right now, we can't go out and do a personal book launch. But I'm holding a virtual book launch on June 29th from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And in the middle of that, my lovely daughter is going to join us, and we're going to talk about growing up and what it was like. And
awesome.
And also I'm having people send in questions to me. And so she'll be addressing some of those questions about what it was like for her at that age.
Okay.
And maybe we'll discuss some strategies about what I did to help her with those things.
That's perfect. That'll be good to have a real life kid in there to go through this process. Yeah, that's perfect.
She's a former kid.
Right. Okay. How old is she now?
Just turned 30.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, she will have good insight, looking back on her childhood and dealing with some of the things with the way that you have worked through the process with it. All right. So
and you can have it. So you can, I'll send you the link to the registration page, and you could post that below the video.
We'll have all this in the show notes. But it's deborahanndavis.com. And that's where the book will be accessible. And then, put the registration link for the virtual book signing. We'll get that in there. I've actually
figured out a way to do an autograph electronically and email it to people.
Oh, that's really cool. Awesome.
I know.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that.
And then a limited number of these.
Okay. Of the paperback of the book. That's perfect. All right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to touch on or anything we haven't covered on how to contact you or anything like that? Is there any other ways
if anybody
people can
has
access?
any questions, they can send me emails at info@deborahanndavis.com.
Okay.
And I'm on all the social media. Plus, I have a mom group, the Mom Meetup, Raising Confident Girls, and I'd like to invite any of your listeners who'd like to join that to go ahead and look it up and join.
Perfect.
It's a really nice, supportive community.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, we'll put that link in the show notes as well. So anyway, I appreciate you being here. It was a great conversation. I have a feeling we could talk all day long about teaching science in the high school and how to handle kids. But we better end it for now. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved it.
You've been listening to Rock Bottom Wellness. Be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review, and be sure to share it with your friends. Tune in every Tuesday for more exciting insights and wisdom on root cause nutrition and thyroid health. And be sure to sign up for your free 7-day Fresh Start Healthy Eating Plan at rockbottomwellness.com, or simply click on the link you'll find in the show notes. The information in this podcast is not intended to replace medical advice. Please see your healthcare provider for your specific health concerns. Until next time, eat well, be well.